So you want us to use these prompts?
You can, if you can come up with your own, that's perfectly fine too. These are just sometimes when you're stuck for what kind of questions to ask, these prompts are helpful. Just thinking, this, if I wanted to check for comprehension, I was still checking for comprehension, how would you form your sentences to keep it open-ended and still tell me that they understood what they were reading?
Like we can choose, like we can make questions from here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So is this talking about him directly? Like this is
just a third person.
story.
Yeah, it's a story.
Okay.
It's a very, very, very
So
short story.
My first question would be, how did you like the game?
But it's not them. This is what they're reading.
Uh,
So, you know how, like, all of our students will be doing some form of
we are
reading.
not asking them the questions. How we are making.
You're making up your questions to see. You're making up questions to see if the children understood the story. So, what kind of comprehension questions would you ask to make sure that to know, yeah, this child actually understood the story. So I don't like questions like, oh, what do you do on or what do you do with your grandfather? Is not related to the story, but how would you be able to relate a question to the actual story to find out that they've answered the question, that they understood this.
Have you played any card games? Okay, something like that. I've asked if you. Have you ever played any card games?
But that wouldn't tell me if they know, if they understood the reading.
Then I will ask them who is playing the game here. That is simple, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah. So that will like the Sam is playing the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are certain questions that when you're asking, because when we are asking questions at Saturday school, they will be based on, a lot of times based on what they're reading. So if you go, I think, from red class up, they have a textbook, they do a reading. We need to make sure they understood what they're reading. Now with the pinks, it's a little bit different because your questions they're not actually doing a reading, you're not checking to see if they comprehend the reading, so your questions may be a little bit different the way you ask them. But if this is a reading that they did in your lesson, and you needed to make sure that they actually understood,
Yeah.
how would you ask the questions to see if they understood?
And my second question is going to be, okay, whom did Sam beat? So, sister, did he like? Was he happy? He wasn't very happy. Why? Because she was very young,
Yeah, so those...
And, yeah,
So my
who
question
did-
was, how does he feel about beating his sister?
Yeah.
And that would be an open-ended question, because even though I can give my own reaction to that. I could say he liked it because he was happy because he liked being, or you would say he didn't like it because his sister was younger. And the fact that his sister was younger, if they didn't understand the text, they wouldn't be able to say. So when they're giving you an answer, you have to say, okay, how do you know that? Or what? Because it has to go back to, so you can still ask open-ended questions, but their answers, you have to kind of guide them to answer, how do you know that? Where does it say that?
Whom did he like to play with? So if you say grandfather, why did he like playing grandfather? Because he can challenge him. Grandfather was very good in playing. And
So if you know, why do you think he won? He won probably because his grandfather had taught him the tricks. So there are sometimes there are questions that are actually, they are closed in that way because there is a right or wrong, but how they choose to answer it may be different. So I'm gonna go with, show you the questions that they actually, well, this is not the right. I'm gonna give you some of the questions that, this is a part of a reading test that we do in the IS, and they have questions that cover all sorts of information. Can they just can they find an answer and give it to us? Can they link two different, sometimes you ask a question where one part of the answer is up here, but the next part of the answer is down here. They're linked, but they're not right next to each other. That is also getting them to think beyond, this is the answer, this is what I'm going to say. So, what did the cards have on them? That's just the question you need to read, and it says. You find it. You can find that answer. Why did Sam like to play cards with his grandfather? He taught him tricks. What is the name of the card game that Sam liked playing? Right? Yeah, you have to, and sometimes it confuses the children because the answer, the question, the answer doesn't have the exact words of the question. You have to know, you have to understand that text. So even though the question is quite closed, it's a closed question, their brains still need to think about how do I know this information? His sister was easy to beat. What do the words easy to beat mean? You're checking vocabulary. Sometimes you need to check vocabulary. You have to ask that question. And because if they didn't understand what that word phrase meant, they probably didn't understand the whole sentence or maybe things around it. Why would Sam soon be as good as his brother?
Because he's still learning.
But why would he be, why do you think he'll be, why would he soon be as good? What was happening?
Because he plays a lot with grandpa.
He was practicing.
So using that information, it never says in that text that I don't think it does, that he will soon be
At the
As
end,
good
he
as
is-
he
Ah,
is.
good as
One
it
day
is.
he will be
One day he will be good. But it doesn't, it's that sentence does not have it, does not say
Doesn't
because,
have because, yeah.
So you have to figure out why based on the information that you read.
Yeah.
So even though it's in the text, if they didn't understand the text, they would have read that sentence and they wouldn't know where to look for the answer. But if they understood the text, and that question would tell you whether they understood the text or not. Was it fair that Sam played against his little sister?
Yes, because he could understand his strengths by playing with his sister.
Yeah, so you gave me a because, and if your because is related to that, I would be okay. You said no. Why would you say no?
Because it's very easy to win, right? It was so easy for him to win.
But why?
Because sister is like very young, she doesn't know the
Because she's young. So
Yeah.
when you say that, yes, so both these answers are completely opposite, yes and no, but because the student said, yes, because he's practiced and it's fair, he's practiced, he's used his strength, but his sister is younger, so it's not okay. And that's their child's opinion. But we still see that they understood the text because they're using information. Now if they say, no, because I don't like my sister, then you know that child didn't understand anything that they read. And I'm not joking, I have gotten that answer as an answer. No, because I don't like my sister. And for us to check comprehension doesn't necessarily mean we look at a sentence and we just ask the question based on that particular sentence. You can find ways to figure out how to ask a question, and it's tricky. I still have trouble sometimes coming up with open-ended questions, especially when the text is really short, because there's very little information for us to go from. And at times it's just, you understand it? Okay, now I'm going to ask you, what do you do? And getting them to talk, especially at Saturday school, they have a hard time giving their own opinion. They're good at, as they get older, they're good at finding the answers here, but when you say, what would you have done differently if you were Sam? Or what might you do next if you are Sam? Those questions, that's where they get stumped. They're like, well, I don't know what to say. But it's opinion. Based on what you've read, give me how you feel. And that's okay too. Reminding them that's okay. There's no right or wrong answer. Tell them, there's no right or wrong answer. Why do you think? Once you ask the question, when you ask a question, child has to think. They have to think about the question. They have to understand it. So they have to figure out what it means. They have to form an answer in their head. And then they need to actually answer.
This is like our expectation from the
Okay?
text.
So I asked a question. You as students are doing all this. That means giving them 1 second to answer is not enough.
I have a question. Rather than asking them questions, how about they asking us?
And that's perfect too. When they're asking you questions, you know that you will see, you will also understand what they understood of the
Or they making their
own questions. Helps them think because they're trying to figure out, and that's a very good way to get them to do comprehension. And you come up with 5 questions you can ask. Now, at a younger age, they're just going to ask content questions. They're just going to ask closed-ended questions. And that's once they ask those, now you know they understand this, then it's your turn to ask the open-ended questions. Giving them that I think of. And the more you start asking them those questions, it teaches them to ask open-ended questions. So when we're asking, they start thinking. My daughter always tells me, when she was in year 1, so that's kindergarten, so she was reading a book. She read a book with me. She read a book with her teacher at school, and then she came home, took the same book she came and read with me, and I asked her questions. She was, why do you teachers all ask the same kind of questions? So she remembered the style of question that her teacher was asking her, and she picked on it because I asked the same kind of question. Why do you guys ask the same kind of question? Like, at the age of 5, yeah, because teachers ask the same, similar, teachers will ask the questions that are not, she had to look at the picture and answer, but her teacher asked the same kind of questions, and she picked on it. So even at a young age of 5, she picked on the types of questions I was asking. So imagine if you ask questions all the time, they will learn to ask those kind of questions. So we think we're asking questions, but you're not only teaching them the information, you're not finding out what they know, you're actually teaching them to ask questions, which is really important too. On average, studies show teachers give children 1 second to answer a question. We do that. Ali, what is 4 plus 4? Ali's still thinking. He's understanding my question. He's forming that answer, and before he even gets to answer, I'm like, oh no, you tell me. So he hasn't had that chance. He hasn't had that chance to even give me that answer.
Too slow.
It's too slow. We need to give them the chance. And I promise you, all of us have done that. We ask a question, and because we know the answer, we want them to answer, we haven't. They will take longer because you've asked a question in English, they hear English only on Saturdays. That means they need some more time to think about the question, to figure out what are the words I'm going to use to say it. But for them, we don't even give them that chance. They probably are still here when we've gone to the next. So remembering that when you ask a question, wait for a little bit longer.
If they have a hands up?
Sometimes some children have their hands up always. And then you ask their question and then they go, I forgot. Or I don't know. Or because they've understood the question. They thought and they understood the question, but they haven't done this yet. Before they put up their hand, they haven't done this yet.
Okay.
And so their hand is up, but they're probably still doing this. You've asked them the question here, so they don't have an answer yet. So even then, okay, so say when they have their hand up and they don't give you an answer, it's not because they didn't know, they weren't finished thinking. The process isn't finished. Maybe give them another 30 seconds or a minute. Yeah, you need to give them time to think. Oh, sorry, it could be mine. Yeah, it could be mine.
Should we let the phone thinking about the answer?
We'll let them think. When you ask open-ended questions, for example, I ask a question to Alika, and it's an open-ended question. It's always good to get 2 other people to answer the same question. Okay, so what do you think the weather is going to be like tomorrow?
Sunny,
Why do you think that?
because the clouds have left the horizon.
Okay. Anybody have a similar opinion? Sayuri, I'm going to cold call. I want an answer, and sometimes you need to pick on kids. Because when you pick on kids, when they weren't paying, they know, if you do it regularly, they know I could be picked, so I need to pay attention. So, do you agree with him?
Yes.
Okay, why would you agree with him?
Because I watched the weather.
Okay, so and he said completely different thing, but she had to think about why do I agree with him? Who disagrees?
So today's cloudy, so there is a probability that tomorrow might rain, right?
So we've asked the same question, we've tried to get different opinions. That helps the children to know it's okay to have my own opinion as long as I support my opinion. Yeah, because I said so. It's not supporting. Give me a reason why, and then you understood. He knows what horizon is. I now know he knows what horizon is. I now know she checks the weather. And I now know that you know that when the clouds are there, it rains. So all that information I got just by asking the same question to 3 different people. And yeah, and cold calling. Cold calling is, you tell me, because it keeps them attentive. They know to expect to be that you're going to be called. Sorry. Once you ask the question, how do you further extend them? Sometimes you can't just stop at asking that question. So probing. Probing is you ask more questions. So he said, somebody said, and I asked why. Why do you think that? How do you know? Asking them another question based on their answer will get them thinking. Counterfactual answers is asking students for, that's my reaction when I first read it too. And that's why I have to go back to my notes to check. Counterfactual answers are asking them for a different point of view. So, he said agree. I want to know who disagrees and why they disagree. Giving both sides gets them thinking. So, you might say, I agree. Now, I want you to tell me why you would agree. Or why would you disagree then? You think I agree, but I want you to think about it from the other side and say, no, but I want you to tell me why would somebody disagree about this? Because when you agree, you know why, because you've decided. But when you ask them to think the other way, then, so you said it's going to be cloudy. Now it's cloudy today, so it's going to rain. But what if I said, no, think about it, why could it be sunny?
Maybe the clouds might go away.
Yeah. So giving that, the opposite of what your answer is, gets them to think in all different ways.
That sometimes be hard with the group of Japanese people.
Yes.
They tend to agree.
With everything. That's why it's really important to say, you have to disagree.
I agree.
You have to disagree. Yeah. And that's what it is, that's because they don't have enough language probably to express what they want to say. Sometimes.
And
Or
also
culture is, you have to, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I should agree to it.
Yes. And so giving the children a chance to say it's okay to disagree, and making them disagree will hopefully teach them that it's okay to disagree and give your own reasons why. And it's culture. You're not allowed to do it. You're never taught to not do it, but you just end up not doing it. And it's probably going to be harder. And that's why the Japanese children have a hard time when I say, what do you think? Because they've never been asked, what do you think? They've always been asked to tell me what it says. And so it's something that they will need to learn if they're in a community with English, not non-Japanese. So it's a skill that they should learn. It's harder to teach, but it's not impossible. Playing devil's advocate, challenging them. I think you agree, but I want you to now disagree. Challenging them to think, and that helps them think beyond what their normal thinking is. So, all children have a right to access education, and some are only able to do that with the help, patience, and understanding of their well-trained, experienced, and talented TAs. Thank you. So you are